December 10th, 1924. The morning was thick with fog as Edric Vale stepped off the weather-worn coach onto the muddy street of Darkmere. His black coat clung to his solemn form, heavy with the residue of a persistent rain. Around him, the town languished under gray skies, its buildings leaning like mourners at a funeral. Windows shuttered, doors bolted. Even the wind dared not speak too loudly here. Edric had not walked these soil-choked lanes in 20 years, not since the incident. He had returned not as a visitor, but as penitent, a contrite undertaker whose past choices festered like rot beneath marble. Before him lay the place of reckoning, St. Lugosi Cemetery. Beneath it, whispered rumor claimed, a crypt sunken beneath stone and root housed something older than scripture and darker than sin. There, perhaps, redemption awaited. The townsfolk barely acknowledged him. Those who peeked from behind curtains offered hollow-eyed stares and muttered phrases behind lips pale with fear. Fragments of overheard warnings chilled his resolve. "It stirs again," one murmured. "Voices in the drain," said another. A boy ran past, screaming laughter, his shadow trailing unnaturally far behind. Darkmere was dying, if not already dead. A familiar voice rasped through the fog. "Edric, by the saints, is that truly you?" Reverend Josiah Crow stepped from the chapel's threshold, his frame gaunt, his eyes sunken deep in shadow. Age hung over him like a shroud, yet his grip was firm when he took Edric's hand. "You've returned, and not a moment too soon. Darkness has crept into the seams of our world." "I did not return for sermons," Edric replied. "Only truth, and perhaps peace." Crow nodded gravely, then produced a key wrapped in a velvet cloth, old brass etched with symbols more arcane than liturgical. "This opens the forgotten passage beneath the monument of Absalom Grey. You'll find the entrance when the sun slides behind Arthur's Hollow. There, the stone sings at dusk." Edric turned the key over in his palm, its cold weight stirring something beneath his sternum. Dread mingled with purpose. And what lies below? Not salvation. A pause. But understanding. A disturbed bell tolled in the distance, tinny and arrhythmic like the heartbeat of something ill. Crows cawed in unison from the steeple's edge. "You'll have questions," Crow said, stepping back into gloom. "But answers will only come below. Be warned, Edric. Some truths don't forgive." Edric watched as the chapel door shut behind the Reverend with a final thud. That night, Edric prepared. He scrubbed his tools meticulously, recited quiet prayers, and reread the confession he had written years ago but never delivered. The shadows in his rented room flickered without flame, coiling like tendrils from a dreaming abyss. As dusk kissed the monument of Absalom Grey, the stone beneath Edric's feet hummed, a low, ancient cadence. Clutching the crypt key tightly, he descended into the mouth of the unknown, candlelight barely piercing the dark. Behind him, the town held its breath. Before him, the earth waited to remember. The cemetery greeted Edric Vale with an oppressive silence. Mist coiled through leaning headstones like the fingers of forgotten dead, and every crunch of gravel beneath his boots echoed louder than reason allowed. Clutched in his shaking hand, the crypt key pulsed with a warmth that defied the winter chill. The entrance, a half-buried stone archway at the base of the cemetery hill, had not seen light in generations. Cryptic symbols etched into the moss-covered stones shimmered faintly as the key met the lock. A groan reverberated from within the earth, the sound of ancient slumber disturbed. When the door creaked open, a hot gust of fetid air greeted him, more breath than breeze, whispering across his skin with the scent of iron and decay. He descended steeply, flame from his torch casting flailing shadows on long dormant walls. The deeper he ventured, the more alien the carvings became. No longer Latin epitaphs or pagan symbols, but strange constellations etched into obsidian. Constellations he somehow recognized yet could not name. He muttered prayers unwillingly remembered from apocryphal texts, his breath quickening in sync with the pulse of the key. The cavern deepened into a rotunda hewn from rock, walls slick with moisture that shimmered unnaturally in the torchlight. At the center, a sarcophagus of greenish basalt sat atop a dais, its surface etched with concentric circles spiraling into an iris of void. With trembling fingers, Edric fitted the key into a hidden slot. The stone lid shifted with the cry of grinding ages. No bones lay within, no relics or remains. Only emptiness and then light. A pulse, not of color, but the absence of it. A searing, invisible presence burst from the tomb, formless yet nauseatingly sentient. Edric reeled as alien thought pounded into him. Hunger without mouth, vision without eyes, and an ancient loathing beyond stars. The grotto bent around him as time shuddered. The symbols on the walls wailed silently, bleeding shadows. The torch extinguished, yet still he saw. Then dark. When Edric surged to the surface, the world had changed. The townspeople screamed at things unseen, clawing skyward or collapsing in spasms of ecstasy and agony. A butcher was tearing his own skin, convinced it was infested with colors he couldn't bleed. A child cackled in an ancient tongue, carving equations into the dirt with a severed finger. Edric stumbled past them, stunned, mind split by a warping truth. Something had come back with him. On the chapel steps, Reverend Crow awaited, with vacant eyes and words that reassured nothing. "The key was your penance, Edric," Crow said softly, "and you have delivered salvation for those who remember." But already the streets no longer recognized Edric. Already the madness grew deeper, as if grief were a net cast wide, and belief the bait. He had sought redemption. He had found apocalypse. Wails echoed through the twisted lanes of Darkmere as chaos surged like a tide. The townspeople howling against unseen terrors, their eyes bloodshot, clawing at the air as though moonstruck. Edric Vale stumbled through the hysteria, his frock torn, blood crusted on his brow, heart pounding in bewildered despair. The color was loose. He had loosed it, and now the very fabric of the town was unraveling. He sought the only soul he trusted, or had trusted, Reverend Josiah Crow. The chapel, once a sanctum, now loomed shattered. Stained glass lay strewn like jagged runes, and an oppressive stench slicked the air. From within flickered grotesque shadows, cast by a hellish blend of torchlight and something too ghastly to name. Edric pushed the door open with trembling hands. Inside, Josiah stood at the altar, reading from a weathered, skin-bound tome. Around him, a dozen townspeople crouched or shambled, muttering in tongues, some bleeding from nose or mouth, enthralled and irrevocably broken. The Reverend looked up, his eyes devoid of reason, yet glinting with a fanatical clarity. "You played your part well, Edric," he said, voice calm amid the madness. All these years and you never guessed. Guilt is the finest key when forged in betrayal. Edric staggered forward. You knew what was beneath the crypt? You used me? I shaped you, Josiah whispered, stepping away from the altar. The sin you buried deep, the child buried alive in the crypt 10 winters past. It was no accident. I vowed to make you carry that shame, to burn it into your soul until the gate fell open. Revulsion overtook Edric. You orchestrated it. As was foretold, Crow hissed, smiling. Only a vessel as soiled as yours could breach the seal. You freed the color. It's the ancient voice of truth. Through it, this world will be unshackled. Edric's hands clenched into fists. The weight of his remorse had finally found its source. Not within himself, but seated in deception. He felt the gravity of collapse, and yet, in that abyss, his spine stiffened. Then I'll seal it again, even if it kills me. The Reverend laughed, low and rasping. You think it can be bound by mortal hands again? But Edric had already turned. The chapel's congregants twitched and howled around him, yet did not impede him. He understood now. They were vessels, not enemies. The true battle lay beneath, and Crow's arrogance would be his weapon. As he passed the altar, he snatched the tome, and in an act of silent declaration, he cut off Josiah's hand with a ceremonial knife, ignoring the startled animal scream that followed. Edric fled into the night, the severed hand wrapped in linen, and the cursed book clutched tight. The color shrieked from the void, its presence pressing against his mind like unseen jaws. But he would descend once more, now not as a forsaken undertaker seeking redemption, but as the final warden of the threshold. Darkmere burned behind him, but within Edric, something had kindled, not hope, but resolve seared into bone. The cost would be great. The ritual would demand more than knowledge, more than blood. But he would pay it all. Ashes of redemption. Shrouded once more in the subterranean bowels of Darkmere's forgotten grotto, Edric Vale stumbled through the cold, uneven chambers with the spectral howling of the color clawing at the edges of perception. His mind teetered, blood crusted on his temple, fingers trembling around the jagged pages torn from the Reverend's blasphemous grimoire. He carried a crude satchel stained with both fresh and ancient blood. Within it, the severed hand of Josiah Crow, the man he had once called brother. Above the surface, Darkmere moaned with the last gasps of hysteria. Families mad with fear, eyes too wide, mouths gnashing at unseen phantasms. He had seen them fall, some dead by their own hands, others retreating into catatonic silence, as the psychic scream of the color pulsed through each timber, each root, each tombstone with alien glee. Into the central chamber Edric limped, facing again the ancient sarcophagus, now exuding tendrils of cold, unseen force that made the blood behind his eyes vibrate. He placed Josiah's hand upon the lid. It twitched as if remembering its betrayal. From the stolen rites, Edric invoked ancient syllables that oozed like worms from between his teeth. Blood streamed from his nose. The ritual required sacrifice. He constructed the seal in fire, using glyphs drawn in ash and blood. He gouged his own forearms to paint the final runes, casting his life force into each. The color shrieked, a soundless agony that twisted the stone walls into momentary flesh. Shadows melted upward. Edric's sight failed. He continued by memory, speaking from agony, not understanding the words, but knowing their weight. The culmination drew near. A pulse erupted, raw and sickening, and for a breathless second, Edric saw it, the color, slithering, warping space around a nucleus of blind wrath and cosmic apathy. It saw him, and with the last tether of his mind, he offered himself fully to the seal, a vessel, a binding, a curse. Edric crawled into the sarcophagus, placing Josiah's hand upon his chest. His final breath was spent uttering the sealing name, one too dreadful for language. Stone folded shut above him, groaning into place, fused by blood, bone, and ancient will. The crypt sighed. A stillness spread like balm. Above, dawn rose over Darkmere, soft and pale. The villagers awoke with the stunned serenity of survivors after a plague, bearing scars they could not explain, minds wiped clean of Edric Vale. Josiah Crow died decades ago, they said. No one remembered the undertaker. In the graveyard, the entrance to the grotto lay buried once more beneath rubble and salt. The chapel restored, the madness dissipated. Yet sometimes, when the fog grew too thick and the shadows loomed longer than they should, an undertaker's whisper could be heard beneath the earth, eternal, remorseful. And deep in the sealed crypt, in cold silence, the color trembled, waiting.